So the next thing I wanted to talk a little bit more is about education. What do you think about studying in the U.S.? Do you think it was great? Do you think maybe you learn more if you study in the UK? What are your thoughts about it?
Um, so there's a couple of ways to look into that. So I like how you generalize the subjects. So in the UK, the way university works is we have modules. So you pick a course, let's say business, and within that course you do business modules. Whatever you might do, say for a term or a semester, we call it a term back home. For a term, you might do accounting, then you might do um, law or business ethics or something like that. Um, the next module, it kind of builds up like that. So there's a 4-year program. You do module by module by module by module, and if you don't pass, you have to re-roll and do it again. Things like that. But in the US, it's more generalized to a I feel a lower standard because you take different classes, but everything's different all the time. So for the first semester, you could be taking maths, business ethics, accounting, English writing, things like that. But how deep can you really go for a class you're taking, say 3 times a week for one semester? I don't know what you think about that. I just think there's only so much you can do in, what is it, a 16-week course, maybe less, 14-week course. You know what I mean? I just think that there's definitely
Yeah.
a cap on what you can do. So I felt it was pretty simple to complete university here rather than the UK. Obviously, I don't have first-hand experience taking university in the UK, but I know a lot of the stuff that I covered in the US, I covered in my secondary school, high school. So, I already had a sound knowledge for at least all the general education classes. I didn't have to put much time and effort into that, which I guess is a good thing because then I could succeed with the tougher classes because I had more time for those. But even then, I thought it was, let's say, stress-free, I would say. I don't know about how you felt.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree. I think everything here in the US is set up for you to just go and graduate as fast as you can and then start working right away. I think that's the goal. They just want you to study, finish your career fairly quick, and then start working. And if you think about it, the careers here they are only 4 years long. So and you can even finish that earlier. So that's the first difference. In Paraguay, careers are longer. You gotta go to college for maybe 5, 6, 7 years. And I definitely think it was easier here in the U.S. Just like you said, there's only a certain amount of knowledge that you can acquire by studying for a period of 14 weeks, for example. So yeah, and talking with my friends, of course, like you said, I don't have first-hand experience in Paraguay, but I do know, and they tell me how difficult it is. But also, you gotta look at the way they see it because how professors teach in Paraguay um, is pretty bad. So they basically have to study on their own and they have to learn everything by themselves. So that's, of course, it's going to be more difficult. And like you said, studying the US, we didn't really spend that much time, for example, doing homework or focusing on school. I think especially for us that we were athletes, we spend most of our time practicing and getting better at tennis or just having fun, to be honest, not that much time on studying or doing homework.
Right.
Um,
I was fairly surprised at, you know, although, a lot of classes had obviously write 1,000 word essay on whatever, but there was a lot of your class was, your grade was quizzes, things like that are simple. If you just read for 5 minutes, like, you get 100% there, and that counts for 20% of your grade. I mean, how really, on a true false quiz, if you don't even study, the minimum you can get is 50%, really, theoretically. So it's just too, I think that's too easy. Like, there's too much of almost teachers being lazy in terms of, I'm just going to throw a quiz out there rather than actually getting the student to write something.
Make
And
it
I don't have
make
to.
it more challenging.
Yeah, I don't. Because if you throw a quiz out there that's 20 questions, all you have to do is yep, correct. There's no real, girth in the course, if you know what I mean. It's too easy.
Yeah, and like you said, I think it depends a lot on the professor, because I did have some classes that the professor he would make the class more challenging with more quizzes, make it just harder, and of course, when the professor is making the class harder, you gotta study more. There are a few classes that were like that, but for the most part, I felt like they just wanted you to basically finish the course and then move on.
100%. And going to the professor thing, I have a decent story about first semester. Our friend Nacho, he was taking the same English class as me, but with a different professor. And obviously, Nacho from Spain, his first language is not English, so he asked me, "Hey, can you help me write my paper?" Things like that. Sure. So I wrote his paper, whatever. He gets 100. Great, nice. I do the same thing, not the same paper, but a paper for my professor, and I get a C. And that, I was like, there's no way, right? It's just
They
really
gotta be biased.
dependent. Yeah, really dependent on who, the professor is.
And I
That's
think maybe they also bias because Nacho was from Spain, so maybe they
maybe.
make it a little bit easier.
Yeah,
I'm telling you, they just want you to move on at the end of the day.
true. Yeah, that's yeah, good point. Good point. I don't know, but I just thought it was funny. Like, he was getting better grades than me in English, and he can speak English, but there's flaws in his writing. Whereas,
Hmm.
I did pretty much the same thing and get a worse grade just because the professor, grades differently and things like that, or maybe on the day he just didn't want to grade me well. I don't know, or whatever. That's life, I guess. But
Yeah, yeah, and we gotta mention, of course, we went to a smaller private school,
yep,
and we don't have really experience with bigger schools like Harvard, for example. But I can say that I do know some people who went to Harvard, and I always thought that getting into those schools, that everything was gonna be so hard. But actually, talking with these people, they tell me really getting into these schools is hard, but once you are in, everything is easier. It's not really as hard as people think it is. And I think it also comes, like you said, that a lot of things that you were studying in the US that first year, especially, that you learned that in high school. And it was the same for me when I took my math classes and other classes. I already learned that in high school, and I think and I don't know if it was the same for you, but I was impressed by how these people from the US, they couldn't understand anything.
yeah, yeah. I think the point for you, people at Harvard. I'm guessing it depends on what you study for sure, and one thing I think that the benefit of going to the small school, which makes it a little easier, is you have a lot of support. Even if you don't use it, there's a lot of support there for you. If you're struggling with a class or something like that, professors, are looking to make themselves look good anyway. If they have
Hmm.
a bunch of people failing, then the school's going to raise eyebrows and go, okay, what's going on there? So they want you to pass. So no matter what, they're going to try and help you pass in the easiest way. So, I think their goal is to make it a learning environment, but I don't know. There's not an easy way to pass, but also try and learn. It's a mix. There's a mix there for sure, but it's tough, right? There's a
Yeah.
tough balance.
What I do, what I do want to say though is that something that it also makes it easier is comparing it again with Paraguay is that we have here in the U.S. we have more tools, right? So the more tools you have, it is easier to learn. So if just for you to have an idea, when I talk with my friends in Paraguay, they go to the public university, right, which is the best, and they say how the AC, for example, have issues. You know, it doesn't work properly, and they say how the environment is not the best to learn. You know, so that's probably not the case in the UK, but just something for you, probably you think is interesting. If you compare it with South America, a country like Paraguay, studying the U.S. was so much better. You know,
Right,
like
right, right.
everything was nicer. You know what I
Clean
mean?
and yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, yeah, I would say it's fairly similar to the UK, really, in terms of quality of whatever tools. We're both
Hmm.
economically fairly similar, I would say. So access to everything. The classrooms are great. The dorms are pretty similar, even if they're not great. I mean, I feel like dorms are not meant to be great.
Yeah.
It's their way of making a bit of money, cheap money. Don't have to put much into it, and just they're charging. What did we pay, like 6,000 a year for? Before all scholarships or whatever, but it's 6,000 they charge for.
Yeah, I read it the other day. The college is like 47K or something a year, but with a scholarship, I mean, if you look into the page, that's what it says.
So I'm going to ask you this: at $47,000 a year, would you pay that?
No, I mean, no way. It is way too expensive. But if you
Yes.
go to a public school, though, that's I think it's different. You know.
Yes. So I'm going to ask you this actually. Do you think so? North Carolina Wesleyan is there's about 1,400 students there, I believe, undergrad. So do you think that the college is easy because there was so many athletes at the school? So everybody to be there, really, everybody kind of played a sport for the majority, right? So do you think it's almost like that college is made for sport? That's about it, really. There's yeah, you get your degree, but in essence, it's why would you go to a small school if you weren't playing sport, right? If you were there at Wesleyan not playing sport, how miserable would you have been?
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, I I don't know if it is meant for athletes. I think I mean, like the school is getting better and better with buildings and stuff. I think they just want to bring as many people as possible because they want to grow. And the best way to bring these people in is to give them a opportunity to play sports because otherwise,
Right,
why would they come,
right,
right? Why
right.
would they come to a smaller school if you are not going to play sports?
100%. Yeah, that's a good point. Um, but yeah, definitely the last few years the university's definitely grown facility wise. So it'll be interesting to see what the college looks like now university, what it looks like in 20 years time, right? That
Not only, I think in 5 years or 10 years, we
yeah,
will see a big change already.
true, true. It'll be interesting.
But